they're trying to put everybody first. They think that when there's time left over after they've taken care of everybody else, then they can do their stuff. They think it's selfish to put themselves first or take care of themselves. And then they start stressing themselves out more and more and more because the body's like, hey, these symptoms simply mean I'm trying to get your attention. And the fact that you're ignoring these symptoms or trying to suppress them with medication or just pretending they're not there is me saying, okay, well, now I need to attack you harder because you're not hearing me.
Hi, Kirstin. Thank you so much for joining me on the Your Body's Way podcast. I'm so glad to have you. And I've been waiting for quite some weeks because I know you're super, super busy. You have a book that's going to be coming out soon. You've just finished an event and you've got more stuff in the pipeline. And I just feel like there's so much going on that I'm kind of glad I managed to get you right now on this
It has been a
conversation.
busy season, yes.
And we were just chatting and you literally were just letting it all out. You're just like, I've got this going on. I've got this going on. I'm just like, give it to me.
So many things. Yeah. Because we're trying to squeeze everything in before the holidays and get everything done. And but I'm excited that we're able to meet up.
Me too. Because I have to admit, autoimmunity, there's something about it that really catches my attention. It's so fascinating. I mean, I'm a functional medicine student and I'm a nutritional therapist. I'm basically a nutritionist. And I've dealt with clients in the past who have dealt with autoimmune issues. And the more I delve into autoimmunity, the more fascinated I become with it, because it basically, from what I understand, and you're going to just give the entire lowdown, but from what I understand of autoimmunity, it is so, the symptoms are so widespread. It can happen to any system in your body. There are, like you just said, just before we started recording, there are over 200 different types out there. And some of the symptoms you wouldn't even think would be related to autoimmunity. So there are probably women out there listening to this who might have kind of symptoms that have come up recently and they don't know how to deal with it. Their doctors aren't sure what to do with it. And they just don't know what to do. But it could very well be one of the wide spectrum of autoimmune conditions, because it's a female, it's very popular with females, more females than males. And it's just, once you have one, then another one can stack on top and another one can stack on top, because it's an immune system issue. So exactly. So once you have one, then it will tend to just stack on top, stack on top, stack on top if it's not managed. And I believe that your part in this autoimmune kind of journey that people are on, your part is to be like, okay, we've got to stop this stacking and all of these medications, because people are put on these medications and it can really mess with them. So I know you've got so much information in your head and I just need to extract it. So first of all, I need to know about you, your journey, because I know you've had a really interesting journey with autoimmunity.
Yeah, which is the only reason, frankly, that I'm in this. I didn't dress up like as a nutritionist for Halloween. Like this isn't what I wanted to be when I grew up. But I got dragged into it. I was a marketing consultant and I used to travel all over the country and talk to big groups and speak at events on marketing and sales and business and all of the stuff. And I was traveling so much, I assumed that's why I was so tired. So I was tired, I had foggy brain, I was confused, I was gaining weight. I felt out of sorts. I would get really frustrated or really angry. Like the mood swings would just be all over the place. I'd be crying, I'd be upset. And it was just like, oh, I'm so tired because I'm traveling and I'm running a business. And so the doctors kind of just pushed me to the side as far as, oh, that's normal. But I mean, I was in my late 20s and early 30s and thinking, I'm too young to be feeling this old. Like this isn't, something's wrong. And they'd be telling me, oh, well, this is kind of premenopausal symptoms. And I'm like, at 28, really? So, there was always some like answer. So I was seeing the OBGYN and they were putting me on hormone control pills and they were putting me on this and it wasn't really getting any better. It was stopping some of my symptoms, but like the weight gain was all over the place. And I just didn't feel good, and digestive issues all over the place, and acne. Oh my God, the worst. I didn't have acne as a kid, but as an adult, it was so bad I didn't want to even leave my house sometimes. And I was speaking on platforms in front of like hundreds of people at a time. So I was mortified, and you can only use so much makeup, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was spiraling, and I finally was really, really, really sick. And I ended up finally deciding to leave traditional medicine, more conventional thought process. And I ended up seeing a naturopath. And she was like, oh, well, you have food sensitivities. And oh, I forgot to, even the best part of the story is I was having these anaphylactic responses where my eyes would swell up, I couldn't breathe anymore, I would get hives everywhere, and the doctors couldn't figure that one out either. I had seen specialists on allergies, and they are like, well, you have an allergy, like EpiPen carrying allergy to wheat and latex, and so you should avoid those things. And I'm like, okay. And then they just kind of sent me on my merry way with an inhaler and a couple of EpiPens.
And I can just imagine, just by this story so far, you must have felt so out of control
Oh my God,
and like
yes.
what is happening to you, overwhelmed. Like I can imagine.
Yeah, and I was scared because the EpiPen kind of reactions would happen seemingly out of nowhere. Like I didn't think I ate the stuff, or I didn't. So I would have these seemingly random events, and I'd just start sneezing and couldn't stop, or my eyes would be. So it was. So finally, I ended up trying a naturopath, and she did some food sensitivity testing, and I was seemingly allergic to everything. And I was trying to follow food sensitivity diets and food rotation diets, and I was trying to eat better, and it just wasn't really getting much better. So I ended up finally just being like, okay, I can't take this anymore. So I went back to school for nutrition. And then I really started digging deeper into why does this happen for people? And then I got the diagnosis for celiac and was like, okay, that explains some things. And then I got the diagnosis for Hashimoto's when I was in school, which is the attack on the thyroid.
Mm.
And there was Hashimoto's in my family. My mother had it. We had emphysema issues in my family, diabetes issues in my family. So they're all autoimmune related. So I'm like, okay, some of this is making sense. So I'm like, oh, of course it's just genetics. And then I really learned what influences genetics, and really genetics are not in control, and if you can control certain things. So it all started making sense, and I was able to start reversing my symptoms, stopping them completely, and then reversing the lab interpretation that Hashimoto's was even a thing, or celiac was even a thing. So if you look at now, of course, I'm almost 49 now. If you look back over the last 15 years of me doing this, my labs have changed so dramatically that any doctor looking at my labs now would not diagnose me with Hashimoto's or celiac.
Wow, that is incredible. And it's
Right?
how long did that journey take you from finding out you had these conditions to then clearing the labs? Because don't autoimmune conditions take years and years and years to develop in the first place? So how long did it
Yes.
take you to undo it all?
So the average time that it takes for somebody to discover they have an autoimmune condition from the time the symptoms really started is somewhere between 3 and 10 years,
Oh my
is the
gosh.
average person from when they're like, hey, I think something's not right, to I get a diagnosis. Now, I think over time that's going to shrink a little bit because doctors are looking for it more now than they ever have before. But I think with people like me and people out in the natural healing community talking about this more, I'm hoping people are starting to think this way a little bit faster. But you're looking at most people somewhere 3 to 10 years. Though most traditional, conventional medical professionals will tell you you can never reverse an autoimmune condition. So I think there's some semantics going on in that. But if you would look at my labs now and you wouldn't diagnose me with that, they'll say, well, it's in remission. I'm like, but you didn't know it was the thing. So, it's splitting hairs, I think, but
And I presume your symptoms are clear
they're pretty
as
much
well.
gone.
Well,
Every now and then something will spike up, but I pay attention to where my stress levels are, what I've been eating. We're big fans of that. Anyone with any type of chronic issue or autoimmune condition really cannot tolerate, whether they realize it or not, cannot tolerate gluten and cannot tolerate dairy. So anything from an udder, so any type of butter, ghee, milk, cream, any cheese. I know people get really upset when we say that.
yeah, yeah.
No one tolerates that as a whole, but anyone with autoimmune absolutely is seeing more inflammatory response, whether they realize it or not. Because most people will eat it and say, I feel fine. I'm like, you realize that could be doing some inflammatory response for 4, 10, 15 days later.
Yeah.
So you're not going to make the direct connection. But
Yeah.
as far as diet, we find it depends on the person. So
Yeah.
some people do
Yeah.
better plant-based. Some people do much better eating animal protein. I do much better eating animal protein.
Yeah.
But you have to understand yourself and understand what works best for you.
So, okay, so let's backtrack a little bit.
Yep.
First of all, you said something really interesting. You said that previously that doctors, they can only recognize like a handful of autoimmune conditions, but in fact there are like 200. So
Yeah.
what are some of the autoimmune conditions that are out there that people are looking for? And what is autoimmunity?
This is a great question. So I'll start with the autoimmunity question, then we'll back into the other ones.
Yes.
So autoimmune essentially is your body attacking yourself. So if you understand that your body's job is to twofold, your immune system's job is to protect you from things coming from the outside, like bacterias and illnesses and things like that. But its second job is actually to help you heal. So when the immune system is on overload and it starts getting confused, it's not too over the top, it's confused. What it'll do is it'll start attacking things within you, thinking those things within you are part of the enemy that it has to protect you from. So emotionally, mentally, and physically, if there's an inflammatory response, so if you're stressed in any way because you're eating something that doesn't work for your system, if you're emotionally not able to process things that are happening to you either in your past or in your present, your body isn't handling that. Or if you have a belief system or a thought process or a paradigm that's going through your mental process, your body actually stops recognizing you to be part of self. So the immune system will start looking for certain things, saying, oh, that tissue doesn't make sense to me within the body. That belief system is in conflict with who I am. So the immune system starts to be confused on what it's protecting you from and what it is trying to rid you of. So we work with people emotionally, mentally, and physically to look at the system as an entire whole being, to say, okay, what emotionally is out of whack for you? What out of whack? That's a technical term. What emotionally is out of balance for you? What's
That's my kind of
physically out of
term.
balance? Right.
Just like what's out of whack.
Right. We diagnose you out of whack.
Yeah.
But we look at the system to say what's imbalanced emotionally, mentally, or physically, because you can't just have one physical issue or one mental issue. It's all combined and having some impact all around.
And
So
that's
the
what I
emotional,
find,
yeah,
sorry to
yeah.
interrupt you, but that's what I find really fascinating, because it doesn't usually come down to one thing, right? It's usually a whole collection. It's your lifestyle. So, for example, a lot of women have autoimmune conditions flare up after giving birth.
Yes,
Because
most common
pregnancy
thing.
and pregnancy and giving birth and the trauma that your body goes through is such a stressful thing that if you had an autoimmune condition brewing for years prior to that, then the pregnancy and the labor can be the trigger that your
Exactly.
body was waiting for, and then that can cause it to flare up. But then on top of that, if you're not sleeping, and then on top of that, if you've got stuff at work and you've got emotional stuff and you're not eating well, and like literally the stresses stack on top of each other, and that's what aggravates the immune system even more. It's like, I can't take it, and then it just lashes out.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it doesn't have the ability to manage the process anymore because you've stacked this and this and this. So that's where a lot of people, and I absolutely got this wrong in the beginning because I thought, well, it's all about the food or it's all about the tangible stuff.
Yes.
So if I take this tomato out and I take out the gluten dairy and then I, watch how I'm eating my broccoli, then it'll fix it. And it helped, but it actually stressed me out more because I was trying to make it perfect. I was trying to, and there is no perfect diet. There's a good diet for you where you are right now, but it's going to continue to shift on you if you don't understand your own body in the process. So what we find is a lot of people white knuckling it around the diet.
And that is a stress on top of all of it, which isn't helping.
And then not looking at their stressors emotionally.
Right.
So, they're trying to put everybody first. They think that when there's time left over after they've taken care of everybody else, then they can do their stuff. They think it's selfish to put themselves first or take care of themselves. And then they start stressing themselves out more and more and more because the body's like, hey, these symptoms simply mean I'm trying to get your attention. And the fact that you're ignoring these symptoms or trying to suppress them with medication or just pretending they're not there is me saying, okay, well, now I need to attack you harder because you're not hearing me. So I'm going to give you another symptom and another thing, and you're not going to sleep, and you're going to get until you pay attention to what I'm trying to tell you. So that makes it harder on people.
Yeah, and so that kind of leads me into the question before you go into the different types of autoimmune diseases out there. But that goes to me thinking, okay, so females are the ones that get this the most, basically. I don't know the percentage. Do you, off
It's
the top of your
really,
head?
it's changing all the time that we're seeing more men come through, but women, it's absolutely much higher, especially for specific autoimmune conditions, but it
Yeah.
is much higher. It's like the 3 or 4 to 1, I think.
But it makes me think, so all of the things you just described about, people putting other people first and then dealing with themselves, that is a typical female trait.
Yes.
Just putting her family first, looking after the home, and making sure the dinner's on the table, and things like that. And do you think personality comes into autoimmunity? Because I heard this really interesting fact. I don't know if it's a fact 100%, but apparently perfectionist traits and people who want to, like, high achievers, they are more likely to struggle with this sort of thing because they're putting that stress on themselves, and that is causing the immune system to lash out. So, I mean, what's your perspective on that?
We most of our clients are A-type personalities. They're perfectionists. We actually do entire pieces of our program on how to understand perfectionism and understand that it's a trauma response. It's not a personality trait. It's actually a trauma response.
Wow.
So it's a conditioned response to make sure you're getting the love or the attention you need from your parents when you're younger. So it develops really early. So a lot of people, pride themselves on, their perfectionism, which I'm looking at that saying, okay, that's actually a trauma response on top of a trauma response, because now you're celebrating the very thing that's keeping you in a fear position. So a lot
It's
of
seen
people,
as like a good thing. They're like, I'm a perfectionist.
yes.
Like, just
And I'm like, oh, that's a trauma response. Let's talk about that. So that's something we consider a positive trauma, because people celebrate it, not realizing it's something that is actually working against them at the underneath surface. So we do a lot on both negative traumas and positive traumas, which people don't realize. Like the idea that I'm strong and I can handle this and I can take it, that's a positive trauma. Like you're celebrating the thing that is causing your body to go into shutdown or attack mode. Yeah. So we talk a lot about that in the program, and understanding the paradigms and the underlying subconscious conversation that's going on that you might not be aware of, that is literally causing that triggered attack all the time.
Okay, so basically being hard on yourself, being a perfectionist, like putting all this stress on yourself, that is not helping. So what sort of what other popular diseases out there, conditions, and what are we dealing with out there?
Yeah, so Hashimoto's is the most common one that we see. It's the attack on the thyroid. Most people are not getting the full Hashimoto's diagnosis. What they're getting is hypothyroid or hyperthyroid. So hypo is the most common one. 90% of people who are hypothyroid diagnosed are actually Hashimoto's, which means that the immune system is really the problem, not the thyroid. Because you said in the beginning, the immune system is pretty much the piece that pulls it all together. So it doesn't matter whether it's Hashimoto's or celiac disease or lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or vitiligo. I mean, we could go on all day naming the autoimmune conditions. What the issue is not where it's attacking, it's that it's attacking.
It's the immune system as a whole.
Exactly. So as we continue to treat where it's attacking, that's in the best world is suppressing your symptom, but it's not stopping the problem. So like you said before, chances 50% of the people who end up with one end up with a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth autoimmune condition, because they didn't correct the original issue with the immune system.
I mean, if you look at something like psoriasis, like skin conditions, acne, psoriasis, I mean, so people are usually given some skin creams. They think, right, this is a skin issue. So they're given some skin cream to try and mask up the issue, but then the problem keeps coming back. And then now the creams are causing problems because, they're interacting with the system. And then you haven't dealt with the immune system itself. Exactly. And so that's where a lot of people are kind of tripped up, and they just end up on just a pile of medications, all interacting with each other, all being taken at all hours of the day. And it just literally that it controls their life, basically.
Yeah. And then again, or they're taking an immunosuppressant, which is now suppressing your immune system. So it's suppressing your ability to protect from other things, which is going to be more likely you get something, the flu, cancers, other issues that are coming at you. So now you've suppressed the immune system, and then you're suppressing your ability to heal. So when you're on an immunosuppressant, your body can't heal from what's going on. in the inherent way it knows how to, because you're stopping or squashing its ability. So the medications, in some cases, they're suppressing symptoms and may make you feel better for a period of time, but now they're causing either a side effect or they're stopping the body's natural ability to do its job. Right. So then we cause more confusion and more fear and more symptoms that come out in a different way. And a lot of people don't make that connection. So like with Hashimoto's, for example, the most common condition, or the most common medications for Hashimoto's are directly tied to osteoporosis. So like my mother was on medications for thyroid for Hashimoto's for 10 years. Osteoporosis was just coming at her hard and fast. And I kept saying to her, I'm like, once I got into doing this, I'm like, Mom, you know, that this is not good. So she finally said, okay, fine, what do I do? So I took her through basically the program that we take our clients through. And she was able not only to get off her thyroid medication, she was able to get off her allergy medication. She was able to get off her osteoporosis medication. She was able to get off everything she was on. And there were 5 of them. Her doctor was so confused by what happened. She contacted me and said, can you explain to me why what you did worked? And I was like, sure. So we took her through the process and she's like, okay, great. And she, though, every time my mother saw her after that, she tried to get her back on something, even though her labs were showing that it wasn't a problem anymore. But in her head, the way she was trained, you know, it's once you have a diagnosis, you have to be on medication. So my mom's doing great.
I mean, because the doctors, they do their best. They studied long and hard for what they do, and they do their absolute best with the knowledge that they have. Exactly. But having outside intervention from people like yourself can really change the game for someone. So, I mean, if someone was to come into you then, so if someone was to come to you with some suspicious symptoms or with a full-blown autoimmune condition, what is part of your protocol?
So the most common things we see when people come at us are going to be usually extreme fatigue or fatigue where they can't explain it, where it's like, I'm fine, and then I'm not, and then I'm fine. Hormone imbalance is typically really, digestive issues are really huge, or they have whatever the symptom is of the thing. So the skin rash, the achy knees, the joints, all of that.
But and again, just before you carry on, I just want to kind of highlight the fact that of how widespread those symptoms are. Like everything you've just said, it's all over. And so how would someone know it's to do with their immune system? They'll just be like, you know, I've got all of these different symptoms, and like it can happen anywhere. So yeah, carry on.
Basically, if somebody's seeing a symptom that just won't stop, like it's not just for a short period of time because I had an illness or like I had the flu or I was just overstressed. Like if it's all the time where I'm always tired and I'm always dealing with this headache, or I have migraines multiple times, or the skin rash comes and goes, like that means it's not being, the root issue is not being corrected. So if it's something that happened for 2 weeks and then it's done, that's different. But if it's something that no matter what you're trying, it's not getting better, or you feel like you're sleeping 10 hours a night and you wake up exhausted, there's something bigger going on. So I want people to kind of look at something that's more chronic, to be likely that the immune system is absolutely involved, even if it's not an immune disorder.
And how would you define chronic? Like how long are we talking?
Again, if it's a short period of time where it's like it was a week or 10 days, okay, fine. But if we're starting to notice this is up and down, and it's starting to get into months, and then you realize you've been dealing with this for a couple of years, and then it's not because you're going into menopause, it's not because, it's none of those things. It's because there's something that is imbalanced in the system that's not being corrected. And I hate it when doctors are like, oh, well, it's menopause. Menopause is usually a triggered moment in time because your adrenal glands are responsible for half your hormone production. Your sex organs are responsible for the other half. So as we get closer to menopause, and this is for men too, they hit it around the same time. It's an andropause, I think is what it's called for men. We get up in that 35, 45, 50-year-old range. Our sex organs start to slow down their production of hormone. Our adrenals have to pick up the slack. So if they couldn't handle the half they were doing before, now we're telling them to do all of it. So it's not because of menopause, it's because our adrenals were already exhausted to start.
And that's why some people can go into menopause early, right? Not because they were ready, but because, you know, it was just triggered. It was triggered early.
Yep. So we start to have those bigger issues. So back into this, so that we see, so somebody comes to us and we look at, we say, okay, what are your top 10 symptoms? What is the number one worst, and when did it start? We start looking at, okay, what are you eating? what's going on, what's your vision of how you want your life to look like. And we look at that and say, okay, is that even possible? With majority of people, it's 100% possible to get that. And usually 12 weeks to 12 months is where we see most of our clients needing to start reversing out of the symptoms, seeing a good kick of, oh, now it's coming back. Like I get it, like I'm back to being me.
Yep.
But it
Yep.
takes a good 12 weeks to even like understand the root issues, what's causing this physically, emotionally, and mentally, and get a handle on now how do we teach you to start rooting out those issues, surfacing them, and then dissolving them.
Okay.
So 12 weeks is
So
a good amount of time for people to start getting that.
because they usually say if you're going to heal your gut, for example, it takes about 3 months because that's how long it takes for the lining to rejuvenate,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So a good like a good typical rule is for however many years you've truly been dealing with the symptoms. So this is where I want people to kind of take a deep breath because it's like, oh, it just started last year. I'm like, no, it didn't just start. Like, start asking yourself and thinking back, like, when was I starting to have like hormonal imbalance? Like they put me on birth control a week after I got my period for the first time because I
Right.
was bleeding so terribly. They couldn't figure it out. So
Mm.
at 14, they're sticking me on birth control to fix me. And I'm like, well, how about we understand why? But
Yeah.
no. So, I mean, if I go back to when I was 14, there was issues before that. I look at digestive problems when I was 8, 9, 10, 12 years old. You start looking at those symptoms, you're like, oh God, I may have been dealing with this for 10 or 20 or 30 years, not realizing that was the whisper the body was trying to give me to say there's a problem.
Yeah.
Then the
Yeah.
whisper got louder, and then it was a scream. So I want anybody listening is to really get real with themselves. When did I really first start seeing some stuff? When was the
Mm.
anxiety really starting to become present? When was that kind of issue, whatever it is, fatigue, pain, that kind of thing? When did that start? Then if you look at that, so let's just say it's 10 years, that's the average we see with most people is 10 to 20. It's about a month of healing for every year your body was suffering.
Okay. So that'd be like 10 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, which is why we see most people, it's about a year-ish for most people
Mm.
once they've gotten a diagnosis or once they've really been struggling for a while. It can be a lot faster for some people, but a year is about the average because of how long the symptoms have really kind of been hanging on for. And then we've been
Yeah.
suppressing them, ignoring them, walking away from them, pretending like, oh, it's just this week. But yeah.
Because I saw on your website you said that one of the titles of your blogs was healing. That healing is never a straight line. You said
Right.
something like that. So people can get discouraged. They can be on this journey. Like I presume they'll be fixing their diet with you, working on their mindset, and all of those sorts of things, which we'll come to. But they can be on this journey and then there might be some setbacks and there'll be
Yeah,
twists and turns because nothing in life is
absolutely.
ever linear, right? I
No.
mean, we're complicated human beings. We have no idea what's really going on, really, like,
Yeah.
in our cells and systems. So
Mm-hmm.
it's never a linear thing. But then at the same time, I look at all of your case studies from your clients, the success stories. If you're persistent and you're consistent and you keep working at it with good lifestyle techniques, then you will get there. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's just going to be a bendy road.
Absolutely. And I think that's why a lot of people have tried things in the past and they've gotten some level of success and then they start sliding back. And
Mm.
the reason our program isn't short, and we used to have a program that was 12 weeks, and people would get some amazing results and they'd be like, I got this. I feel better than I've felt in years. I'm out. And then we would check in with them. And a year later, they had fallen back into some old patterns and then they started sliding backwards. It's because what ends up happening is that anybody can suck it up and do anything for like 8 weeks.
Mm.
You can change your diet, you can do a new exercise program, you can do whatever. But what happens is old patterns where traumas actually live, old patterns will surface and say, yeah, you feel great, but we still don't recognize this new stuff to be familiar or safe enough. So even though the other stuff made us feel worse, we're going to go back there because we felt safer doing these old patterns and these old
Mm.
things. So a
Mhm.
lot of what ends up happening in the first 12 weeks, right around the 12-week, 5-month mark, is when old patterns start to show back up. And
Right.
then people don't know how to get themselves back out of that because They're the ones who put those old patterns in there in the first place, or set the defense mechanisms up not to be able to see them. So that's when our coaches really excel. And our team is just amazing, because every single person on my team, except for my husband, every single person on my team went through our program and healed out of an autoimmune condition. So
Wow.
all of our coaches, all of them, they're all practitioners. And then my husband went through it with me. Like, he and I were dating right before I got the diagnosis for celiac and then Hashimoto's. So he's become a practitioner since then.
He was there right from the beginning.
Yeah, so he understands
yeah.
how to be the support system and what it's like to be with somebody who is suffering in this way and trying to heal. So our entire team gets what our clients are going through at a completely different level than the average practitioner.
Yeah.
And we work as a team on each of our clients together. So it's not just one practitioner, it's all of us working together. And then everyone in the community also helping to leverage each other, which is just, it's phenomenal how it works. But I think the reason that we are so successful, or our clients are so successful, is because when they do hit those roadblocks, which you will, like, we don't give anybody the illusion it's going to be like rainbow unicorn happiness all day long. There are moments when it's not. That's when what we do and what our team does is, I think, very different than how other practitioners may approach the same
And
process.
I was talking to someone on a previous podcast, and he had a really good analogy. He said, look, he says to his clients, this isn't going to be rainbows and unicorns like you just said. This is going to be more like, okay, let's get our boots on. We're about to wade through some sludge right now. He's like, I happen to have a kayak, so we're fine, but it's going to be messy. And I think that's a really good analogy. But what you're basically saying is, okay, so the beginning, you may get some great results. But then really the time to really ramp up is not actually that time. The time to really ramp up is when you're comfortable, when it gets to that 12-week mark. That's when you need to ramp it up, and you need to really knuckle down and keep going. Like, don't let go of the reins quite yet until you get, those positive labs. So with your program, so I am so curious. You've helped so many people. What is involved? So do you target diet, mindset? What are the ingredients of your program?
Great question. So we have a process that includes three major components. There's the nutrition component, which is going to be the diet's going to be part of that. It's going to also be whatever nutrients you're getting. So if you're not absorbing the right nutrients, we will use supplementation when necessary. We're not big fans of tons of supplements, because if you're taking $400, $500, $800 a month of supplements, something is not right in your system. And we know that that's an approach where you supplement them until you figure out the problem. But it's expensive to do it that way, and frankly exhausting for the body. So we'll dial in the way the body is absorbing the nutrient value, and we will recommend supplement if necessary. And then movement is part of the nutrition components for us. And that doesn't necessarily mean exercise, but the right movement for you where you are, so you're not stressing the body out and you're helping to calm it and keep it safe.
Right. Because not moving is a stress. Like, being sedentary is one of those stresses we were talking about, and that can stack, and that can lead to autoimmunity if it's got all of the other stresses as well. So I'm with you on that movement 100%.
And then too much movement also can then overly stress your immune system and your adrenals, which a lot of people think they can work their way out of whatever the issue is, which just causes more issue. So that's the major thing there, is the nutrition. And then the next piece is what we call the science component, which we do a couple of labs. We don't do a ton of labs. We find a lot of functional medicine doctors, a lot of conventional medicine doctors. A lot of times they will lab you to death, where that's another technical term, where they're doing, 8, 9, 10 different types of labs looking for that magic unicorn diagnosis. And we're like, let's deal with the brown horses in front of us right now before we look for that. If we have to do other labs, we can, but there's no need. There's 3 very basic labs we use to pretty much solve most of the issues that are underlying. So we'll do the labs.
Elephants, not mice, right?
What I would say?
Elephants, not mice.
Exactly. So we're looking for the big things right in front of us in the room. And my husband is the one that's the lab interpreter, but he'll also go through any labs that people have had done over the last 18 months and reinterpret and look for what other things may have been missed, because this is all we do all day long is chronic and autoimmune related issues. He's looking for specific patterns that most other practitioners aren't looking for.
So if someone has some strange symptoms, they don't know, they don't understand what's going on, what sort of labs would you recommend? What are the big ones that you think they should look at first?
The ones that we look for, well, again, it's like, we're not trying to, It depends on what you're trying to do with the diagnosis. So that's kind of a, let me tell it this way. So what we look at is a basic lab. So we're looking at the basic, just how is the body working? What's really going on from a basic standpoint? Like even if your body is like, how is it functioning? You know, what are your sugar levels? What's just kind of the basics? So that's the first one. The second thing we look at is we look at food sensitivity because it's one of the easiest, fastest ways to start lowering some of the inflammatory response.
Right.
And the third thing we look at is more of what the gut is up to. So what kind of bacteria is in there? Is there some sort of mold issue? There's one very specific test we work with to start looking at the basics. Now, if we have to get deeper than that, then we will. But 90% of the time, you don't have to go that deep.
Right. So like a stool test, a food sensitivity test, maybe a blood sugar test that you can just get done at the doctor with your doctor. But then you'd have to order the stool test, right? And the food sensitivity.
We do urine sample rather than stool. We found that urine is more effective and it's more sensitive because if your body isn't, which is most of our clients, if your gut isn't processing food correctly, it won't necessarily be moving things through into the stool sample, so you don't get an accurate reading. So we go with urine because it's a lot easier to get a more accurate result with that. And again, most of our clients not digesting well. Even when they think they are, like, you're not. So we have to look at that. So they're the ones we look at. We don't go over the top with all of the hormone testing in the beginning and all that. There's frankly just no need in the beginning. Let's get you out of the inflammatory response, calm your system down. And then if there's something that's curious, then we'll look through, but there's most of the time you don't have to.
Because they can be hugely expensive as well for the client.
Like so expensive,
like hundreds of dollars for one test.
We know practitioners that have beginner lab tests, just the labs that are $4,000 just to start.
Wow.
And then their main lab package is like 10, and I'm like, that's just the labs, and I'm like, whoa, that's let's back. Plus, it's overwhelming. Frankly, those tests are always going to find something. So if I come back to you and say there's 15 things we have to fix now, it's going to panic the client, make it harder for them to heal. So what we found is we look at the brown horse kind of concept and we get with the obvious, your body can actually get rid of some of those little tiny things all on its own without having to know they were ever there.
I mean, because food sensitivity is for example, it can be sorted out if the gut itself is sorted out first. So that's just an example. But I need to get your opinion on something then. So with immune issues and autoimmune issues, the autoimmune protocol, so the gluten-free, dairy-free, and then no legumes, it's basically paleo, but like even more strict. And it's very restricted diet, basically. And people have mixed reviews. Obviously, some people get great results, but then some people just can't handle it. It's too much. And, then you have risk of nutrient deficiencies if you're doing it for too long. So do you use the autoimmune protocol or do you put your own sway on it?
Yeah, we have the Nourish protocol, really. I mean, I have done them all. So if somebody comes back to me and says, do you know the so-and-so protocol? I'm like, yes, because I've done it. At some point in this healing process, I've done it. I've done vegan, I have done vegetarian, I have done every other Well's protocol, all of them. So I know exactly personally what it's like to go through this stuff. What we found is that there is no one diet that fixes all things for all people, no matter what. So like we have one particular client, her story is on the website, who has a lupus issue and then a secondary autoimmune issue that's a skin condition that's very rare. So when you see her, her name's Aida, it's very obvious when you look at her picture, like what's going on. She did she posted it and then did a review for us that she showed her when she started with us what her skin looked like and then what happened in like the 4th or 5th month. And it was like, what? And she was on a specific protocol with a doctor who said that this is a lupus protocol, you have to follow this. She followed it for 6 months. She got worse. She went back to the doctor and said, I'm getting worse. And she said, oh, it's because you're detoxing and that's what happens. So do it for another 6 months. She did for another 6 months, got worse. So then she came to us and said, I don't know what to do. I've been following this very specific protocol for my exact autoimmune condition. And I'm like, well, it's not based on the autoimmune condition. It's based on your body. So let's find what works for you. And the interesting thing, she would never let herself be on camera. I saw her one time when she first started because she was so embarrassed by this skin condition. So we didn't know, we couldn't tell she was getting better just by what she looked like because none of us ever saw her on video. She then posted this in the client community. I was like, holy cow,
That's a massive change.
And it was like in 4 months. And she said, I feel better digestively. I mean, we knew the other symptoms were getting better, but that was amazing. And that's what the body does when you find the right diet for you, where you are in your healing journey. So I want people to be super clear about that. So if you're on a super restrictive diet that's now stressing you out and you're afraid, especially if you're a perfectionist, and you're terrified you're getting it wrong the whole time, you won't respond to it well. So AIP diet can be helpful for some people, some of the time, for a short period of time, but it should not be the long term for the rest of your life.
So it's like a quick tool. It's just like use it and then switch it.
Yeah, but some people, it also matters what they grew up on. Like, I'm not going to put somebody with, Hispanic descent on a diet that I would also put somebody who, grew up in like China. Like, your body actually genetically starts leaning towards certain foods and not. So I'm not going to just look at everybody and say, here you go. Like, there's a huge issue with the Native American population because they genetically do not respond to food the same way, but now because they're eating a standard American diet in many cases, you see cases of diabetes and weight issues and a bunch of other problems within that specific population in a way, because they don't eat the same way they natively were raised on. So you see that with a lot of people. You go back to the original culture and also look at that too. So we're starting to see all sorts of problems based on that, but I'm not going to put two people together and to say, well, you both have lupus or Hashimoto's, so you both have to eat the same diet. I'm like, well, who are you individually? Let's find the right diet for you.
So basically, there's a place for autoimmune protocol, the AIP,
for some people,
but it depends on the person. Some people do better adding in certain foods, and some people do better not adding in those foods. But you said at the beginning there's a through line, and gluten and dairy, they tend to be issues for everybody, would you say?
Yeah. So there's test after test after test. If you start looking like that will support that anyone who's eating gluten, there is an inflammatory response at some level. And a lot of it's because the gluten that we eat now, or the wheat that we eat now, is not what it was. If you read about wheat in the Bible, there were 8 chromosomes in that wheat. The wheat we have now, there are 64 chromosomes. I mean, that's not even close to being the same species. So it's not, people like, we've been eating it for hundreds of years. We ate something different before. Plus, we're also more stressed from what's coming in our environment, what's in our water, what's in our food, EMFs. So the toxic load is higher. So we can't compare apples to apples or wheat to wheat that same way. So it depends, again, on the person. But what I know with certainty is that gluten and dairy, no matter how healthy you think you are, is causing you some level of inflammatory response. And if you already have a full-blown autoimmune condition, or you're pretty darn close, adding those or eating those in your diet is not helping you. At best, it's not helping you.
And you can say with the same with dairy, because the quality of the dairy these days is not the same either. It's pasteurized to within an inch of its life. It's half fat, and like they take all the fat out, and they add ingredients and like stabilizers, and there's just so many. It's just not the same as what it was.
Hormone from the animal, and we're the only animal that eats or takes in something from another animal in that way. So the milk wasn't. Nature didn't create the milk for us. It created the milk for the baby, whatever, the cows, the goats. So it doesn't function in the system quite the same way. So if you just look at it, what nature intended for us to do, that wasn't it. So, you kind of start pulling this apart, but it's non-negotiable for us when we take a client that they will continue eating gluten and dairy. If they're like, nope, I'm going to eat gluten and dairy, I'm like, we will not be able to get you will not get the results. You won't. If you think that that's going to be a major part of, or even a small part of your diet. So it's the only non-negotiable thing we have when it comes to food.
Interesting. And I quite like that, because that gives people solid answers. Because sometimes when you say maybe not, that can be, people can struggle with that, because they're like, can you just tell me what to do? Like, I just want to do something, just tell me. So I want to get your opinion then. When we were chatting before this, you mentioned we were talking about fasting, because I'm launching a female fasting program, and it's looking really great. I've just started the pilot program. It's a fab group of ladies. It's just going so well so far. But you mentioned a 3-day fast. that you're doing. So I know 3 days is a long time to go without food, but there is something about fasting in that to get a real deep clean of your immune system, it takes more than just your standard 16-8 or your standard one meal a day, like to really get into the cells, like to literally press Control Alt Delete on your immune system. Would you say 3 days? I mean, what brought you to that? What's the story behind your 3-day fast?
Well, most of the stuff that I've done, it's because I like to be the guinea pig first. Before we recommend anything, basically, I've done it. And my husband and I go down different rabbit holes of this practitioner, or this philosophy, or this, and then we're like, let's try it out. Let's see what happens. So between he and I, we've done them all. I've done almost all of the things we ever recommend. With a water fast, because there's different levels of fasting. There's the juice fasting, and then there's water fasting, and there's liquid fasting, and I've done all of them. I found for me, once we get clients to a certain level where they're just not in just straight chaos all the time, they get to a certain level where we want to be like, let's kind of kick them up a little faster, and let's do this in a guided way. We really like the 3-day fast. There's something to the 72 hours, and there's lots of studies that help support this. Once you kind of hit that 72-hour mark with the water fast, your immune system kicks in a different way. It steps up in a different way. It's able to detox in a different way. It like shifts into a different like mode. So we're big fans of the 72 hours of the water, but we also have a guided way to get into the water fast and then come back out. So our process is about a week. So you're kind of doing some things to prep the system, then you're going into your 3 days, and then you're kind of pulling yourself slowly back out of it. So it is really kind of more of a 7-day process.
Yeah.
But we first start our clients on more of an intermittent fasting approach.
Yeah,
we have a
just to warm
Nourish version of it. Yeah. So, but most of our clients are kind of at least, at the very least, going from the time they stop eating to the time they start eating again in the morning, 12 hours. And then we move them into more liquid in the morning and then more solid foods in the middle of the day. But we're really looking at how the body digests, when it digests best, how to utilize a weakened system, which is the digestive system, to maximize your results as you're learning and you're healing and you're coming out of chaos. But I've done the 3-day fast 4 or 5 times at this point. In fact, we call it Ascension. We have an Ascension level group. Once somebody's gone through our year-long program and they're really like, I feel so good, I don't know what to do with myself kind of thing. Now I want to do the things. Like I want to travel, and I have these bigger expectations of what I want in my life. I want to live at a higher level. We have an Ascension group. I take the Ascension group through a 3-day fast together, and there's 10 people in the group. And so going through it together with 11 people, if you count me, is really a phenomenal experience, because now you're seeing the emotional detox, the mental detox, the attachment to food that they didn't realize they had, because when you're away from food through 3 days, you start to really think about it differently. And some of the amazing shifts that will happen with people in that process. Now, I never recommend anybody does that by themselves, especially if they've never done it before, that they are guided through with somebody who knows what they're doing. So that's, I think, an important part of it, because it's not just I'm going to stop eating for 3 days. That is not not how I'd approach it.
Yeah. I wouldn't do it in a normal day life. Like, I'd do it like a pre-planned kind of, make sure you're not stressed, make sure that, you're relaxed, you have time to be with yourself and to reflect. And there's so many ingredients to make it work, right?
Yeah. Because we also, it's not just the food part. There is an emotional part to it. There's a journaling part. Like we have a whole process that we'll go through with them. But we have them check in every day. We have them check in with their partners every day. Like everybody's like, we know, and some people were like, don't muscle through this either. If you get to a point where you don't feel right, we need to start hearing that too. So it's also a connection with self. Is this the right approach for me? And a lot of those perfectionists and A-type personalities who are so used to pushing through and sucking it up and walking it off, I'm like, some of their experiences, no, this isn't the right thing for me, and I'm going to stop part of the way through. And that in and of itself is a whole learning and growth experience that they can have. So
at what stage of someone's condition would you recommend doing a 3-day fast, a guided 3-day fast? So would you say when they're coming out of it, when their labs are starting to look better, or when they're in the midst of it?
It depends
or does
on
it
the
not
person,
matter?
frankly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more because if we recommend it, it's usually because we feel like we've gotten to a point where the typical stuff has gotten them to a point, but now we want to kind of like switching them to a different mode. And then we have a conversation with them, because mentally and emotionally, there's a there's a pretty big piece to it. So if we approach a client on it, we'll say to them, how do you feel about that? We're going to explain this, but this is why we're going to recommend it. How do you feel about it? And some of them are like, yeah, that feels awesome. Like, I'm excited about that. And some are like, when they're in that space, I'm like, then this is not the right approach. I would never do it with somebody who has any really broken connection with food. So if they've had, the bulimia, they're in some sort of where they're food restricting in a way, which is why I'm not a big fan of AIP diet for most people either.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
so restrictive. It can trigger you into that. So we're very cautious of when we have a client do it. And we love to do it when it's more of a group thing than it's just a one-off.
Yeah.
But there are also clients with us. There's a coaching at least once a day, except for Sundays. There's a coaching element that they can, or a coaching clinic they can jump into at any time. And then they can also reach out to the coaches at any time. So there's a very big connection that we know where they are kind of in their journey at all times. So that's important too, that you're not just like hiding away and trying to suck it up and walk it off.
So what I love about your program and just your approach in general is you target all areas of a person. So we didn't get into mindset too much today, even though I know that mindset is what you mostly focus on, right? That's a big part of what you do. So maybe we'll do another episode and we'll just focus on mindset. Like that would be really awesome.
Yeah.
But you're saying, look at your food, look at your movement, look at your stress levels, your mindset. Just even spiritually, if you're that way inclined, work on that side of things as well. So you're working with all aspects of a person, and that is how you work to heal your immune system. That's how it works. It's a collective thing. It's a holistic thing. So I guess my final question is, if someone is dealing with some symptoms that they're not sure about, they're just feeling rubbish, and like you said, it's been going on for a while, they can't put their finger on it, their doctors can't put their finger on it, what practical advice do you have for someone in that situation today?
I mean, the very first thing, I would always just take out gluten and dairy first, because it's going to lower the inflammatory response. Do it for at least 28 days before you make any ideas on what it's working or not, because the body goes through a cycle in this 28-day cycle. So gluten and dairy would be the first thing. But I'd also take a really good account of what really is going on in my life. Let's get real here, like really deep. And what are the stressors? Like, what do my relationships look like? Are they stressing me out? Do I feel like I want to strangle everyone around me? Does everyone feel like they're working against me? Like, what's going on in my relationships? Do I love what I do every day? Am I in a space where I enjoy my life? And if I haven't tapped into joy recently, there's something going on at a deeper level. If I'm already saying I don't feel right, I feel depressed, I feel disconnected, I'm anxious all the time, really start getting a handle on that and saying, what part of my life am I letting control me? And I'm not feeling controlling in what's happening in my life. So that's a good way to start looking at this, and that there is something at a deeper level. And then to be really clear with yourself that the stuff that got me here, all the practices and all the things and all the cycles whatever decisions I've made that have gotten me here are not going to get me here. So just doing more of that or doing it harder and faster isn't going to get us here. Something has to change. And the chances of you being able to figure all that out on your own and change it and get past your own defense mechanisms are lower. So find someone who knows what they're talking about and that can help you and guide you through and over the obstacles. Otherwise, you're going to just keep running into them over and over thinking you're failing.
Right. And obviously, if they need to see a doctor, but then you'd say also seek outside advice as well, a more holistic, a holistic approach someone has. Yeah,
and find people who have done the thing you want to do. So if you want to overcome autoimmune disease, I mean, that's what we do all day long. But if there's someone that you resonate better than you do with me, and they've done the thing you want, talk to them and figure out what's going to work best for you. Like, we're super clear about who's really great for our clients, to be in our client base, because we want you to succeed. And we're also super clear, like, if you're not where we think we can help you, we're super clear with people about that, because I don't want to add to the things that didn't work for people. Yeah. So that's really important. But go watch their YouTube channels, go watch their Instagram, go listen to what they talk about, go watch their stories of their clients and what they're talking about, what it looks like to work with them. And if you resonate with that, my God, just jump on their calendars or get on a phone call with them and talk to them. It's important.
So I think the message here is if you feel something's up, then don't wait, because it could be something that's been brewing for a long time,
Yep.
a very long time, and it could be ready to, really like pop, like expose itself fully. So take everything seriously, and just seek advice from people you trust, and just don't sit on it. Basically, that's the
No.
general advice.
I think what you just started with is, if you feel like something is not right, no matter what diagnosis you've been given, no matter how normal your labs are, no matter what somebody's telling you about this is normal for women of your age, oh, you just had a baby, oh, you're going through whatever nonsense they're telling you, if you just feel like something is off, it is.
Yeah.
Like that is critical to your healing, and your body's trying to talk to you. So you know you better than you. You just may need somebody to help guide you to decipher what that language is like. But if you feel it, something isn't right, it isn't.
Yeah. So trust your instincts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's important.
Oh, well, that conversation just makes me go, because I feel like I got everything I needed out of that conversation. That was absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so grateful for your time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.